Welcome once again to the Sunday Matinée for September 2014. Here we have celebrated local poet Mark Brayley, who gives us a knockout set of funny, thoughtful and inspiring poems, as well as a few that are quite technically challenging. However, there's one use of one particularly strong swear word, so if you are of a nervous disposition or have children nearby, then this might not be one that's safe for work or safe for young children. Anyway, here's Mark with his first performance at the Sunday Matinée.
I found myself, I haven't been doing very much writing lately, which is obviously a shit thing to do if you're a poet, you're supposed to write quite a lot. So I found myself, I made some soup, and I realised that when I made soup, it was actually sibilant soup, and it had all the S's in, because it had spinach, celery, celeriac, spring onion and seasoning. There's something desperately wrong if what I'm doing here is applying my poetry to my cooking. There's either something wrong with food and there's not enough poetry to it, or I'm not writing enough poetry. So I probably should write some more. Or there should be more poetry in food. And that made me think, when I was coming to do this, it was pretty foul, by the way, this soup. It was like swamp. I tried to put a bit of creme fraiche in it, but obviously that had a C. So that really fucks it up. So when I was getting ready, I sort of dug out this one. This is about poetry and food. And what I did is I tried and put a recipe book together. I was so annoyed with what's called Super Thursday, which is when about 450,000 hardback books get dumped in Waterstones for the Christmas rush. And they're all sort of like Jeremy Clarkson autobiography or Katie Price or something like that. And I feel that sort of market really sort of screws everyone else up. So I wrote this parody cookbook, and where I took the idea of, what's the name, that really irritating one, Nigella Lawson. I took the idea of Nigella Lawson and her amazing enthusiasm for food, and I applied that idea to fucked up life situations. This is called Hot Sweet Supercilious Souffle. So it's written in the style of a cookbook, so it's not really designed for performance, I'm afraid, but I'll give it a crack. This dish can be tricky to pull off at a dinner party with guests that you've not met before. Souffles are notorious for that. And therefore I'd advise serving this dish to people who will forgive such hideous social indiscretions. If your souffle is successful, you will be the envy of all the dinner party circuit. This does, however, come with a health warning. Rabbit stew and lentil casserole friends may be lackluster in their invitations as a result. Ingredients: grease, padding, 20 to 40 years of a loving mother, a generous serving of hot air, a soupçon of saccharine charm, public school or inherent, a dash of expensive taste and a hint of extravagance. 1. Grease the assembled company for 5 minutes with a moderate amount of bawdy but authoritative small talk to take control of the room. 2. Pad out the mixture with light and airy contrariness. 3. Mix in an overture of confidence brought about by a lifetime of overindulgence from a loving mother. 4. Gradually whisk in hot air and build up an overinflated substance. Whisking must be consistent, as any flaw in consistency may result in collapse. 5. Saccharine charm is vital. Without it, this souffle will simply lack taste. 6. Make a show of expensive taste, especially those which reflect the life of someone well-travelled and discerning. 7. Discard half-used conversation of others, separating yolk from albumin and using appropriately. 8. Bake in a room lit by candles and ideally a log fire. 9. Serve immediately. Any cooling time could result in deflation. This dish is best served with a strong dessert wine and a modicum of irony. Some social circles enjoy enhancing the postprandial patter with Peruvian marching powder, but if this is the case, then please ensure you have good quality cocaine for your guests. A good souffle can fall foul even at the final hurdle. So far I've got about 4 recipes, and I reckon I need about 24 to make a book, but still a little way to go. Yeah, so the other thing that happened when I was thinking about today and coming along here today, I live in Newtown, and there's another poet who lives down the road from me. He's tall and thin, and he wears exactly the same sort of glasses as I do. And I stepped out of my house and went, oh shit, hello Johnny. So I thought it'd only be right if I did the poem that I've got here that was actually inspired by Johnny Cooper Clarke. I don't tend to swear quite this much, and I don't tend to rhyme this much, but this one is a performance poem, and I'd say it's largely inspired by Johnny Cooper Clarke. It was one of the earliest poems I wrote at a time when I was still thinking quite a lot about drugs, and it's about a rent boy living in King's Cross. It's not from personal experience. One early evening in King's Cross, where even angels feel a sense of loss, I was making up for last night's flu, for I had fed on honeydew. Never one to miss a trick, I turned quite slow and gave the eye. If my soul was meant for sale, then why a man so old and frail? A High Court judge or drunk MP, paying for head and secrecy. But slowly pulling along the side, I knew it wasn't for a ride, and winding down his window said, I've lost my bloody A to Z, you couldn't help me out, dear boy. For 50 quid I'll be your toy. For food and rent, some for brown, I'll dress up like a fucking clown. But no. Come from the country, eh? Got stuck in this goddamn one way. Frightful traffic, should have caught the train, but public transport's such a pain. Shivering in an alleyway, not knowing if it's night or day, the winter hose down in the West End, being robbed by a so-called friend, being beaten up by the National Front. I'll show you pain, you stupid cunt. Dinner, you see, and then a show. Not quite sure which way to go. He's shut up now in expectation that I should ask his destination, that I should serve the likes of him to full extent of sordid whim. Born wholly into servitude, I find this land absurdly crude. Then for a while he looks at me, then at the road and back again. I wonder what he can see, some tinker straight from Fagin's den, one of London's lonely cherubs, or just the broad band labelled youth. That's where the irony really rubs, if only now he saw the truth. Hollow yet bursting at the seams with experience and hapless dreams, sold out but violently free. I doubt he saw those things in me. There are no more C-bombs, by the way. I've dropped only one C. How long have I got left? I've got... James, how long have I got left? I've got like three more poems to do. I've got actually, I can do... Well, really? I'll go for ages. Seriously, I'll go on for ages. Right, I'm going to do this book here, which is on sale. I've got a couple of copies with me that I can do at mates rates, but it's also in Red Line Books and on Amazon. This book here is called Disarming the Porcupine, and it's about how poets can sort of use poetry as a cathartic exercise, and facing up to some demons and things like that. And that's really quite the first part. There are three parts to this book, and the first part are all about poems that do that. They are Disarming the Porcupine. And this poem is called Disarming the Porcupine. It sums up quite nicely. They're not all quite as miserable and depressing. Here. This is a soft underbelly. Make an incision if you must. Dissect the skull, and you will see I've built my own Calvary, my own Golgotha, upon which I stand with words nailed through my hands. Legions of imperial spears pierce my flank as I wince through ecstasy. Corroded, barbed and acid tips came spear on spear, and I grabbed it all with greedy hands and thrust it in to show my depth, to feed my head, until I bristled top to toe with spears and sparks and spines, a writhing, prostrate porcupine, slit and scarred. No blood and water here, just vinegar and bile. Not 9 but 90,000 hours I waited, expecting more, muttering to the world, Lama Sabachthani, And realising I had only forsaken myself, I prized my palms from my cardboard cross and burnt it in a bonfire of profanities. Waddling away, I bristled with spears with spines to live out spineless years in the undergrowth, snuffling, shuffling, eating worms, a beast amongst animals. When youth and beauty spoke and said, I've known you for 6 years and I'll never really know you. If you want to get close, then do so with extreme caution. Come, take a spear, a spine, a quill, and write the story that it holds. Feel its weight. Kaplank! Best you don't. You'll only be aghast. Take away my defences and I cease to be. Spineless, bald, a bloated rat without a tail. My friends, the porcupine, remains. So they're not all really miserable. You can. They're not all really miserable, but I think that is the epitome of self-loathing and misery. That's what good poets should do, really, at some point. Or they should move on from that, which is a nice thing to do. So I'm working on a new collection now, which kind of moves on from that. I'm a big fan of something called Oulipo, which is writing poetry to certain constraints. It came about in 1960s in France, and you'd have, like Georges Perec wrote a book which didn't have the letter E in at all. It's called a void, or like whatever. In French, there's no letter E. It's written. So there's no letter E throughout the whole of the book. The disappearance represents his missing parents who were killed in the Holocaust. There's a guy called Raymond Queneau who wrote something called 100 million sonnets, where you can cut your lines of your sonnets up and put different lines together to make 100 million different sonnets. I've done that. That's good fun. But one of the things I've done in writing, and what the new thing I'm working on, is playing around with vowels. And so, because I thought this book here was sort of raging egotism, and it's a lot of spewing about 10 years of alcoholism and things like that. Oh no, it's better than that. It's really good. It's only fibre. Because I was trying to distance myself from that collection, which is very, very personal, I thought I'd use an Oulipian restraint to write my new collection, which is what I've done is I'm writing poetry that don't include the letter I. The poems that have no letter I in them at all. So I can't use the first person pronoun. I can't actually say I. I can't say is. So there's no existentialist nihilism allowed at all. So it's quite, the challenge is there. And what you've got to do is you've kind of got to wriggle around different words and phrases that you can't use. There are no dynamic verbs, there's no in any verbs. So yeah, there's a little bit of trickiness to work my way around. But also it means I've got to look at other things rather than just wiggling on about being a poet. So I've got 3 of those for you. So yeah, if you hear the letter I, you can sack me. There's not one place we went that now welcomes me alone. Each space rejects my memory of loss and shows less care than anyone dares reveal as my other fades beyond what was once the sky. We posed for photos here. Who knows where they are now? The gentle breeze swells the hope that we can be once more. Salt, seaweed and blasted sand, sharp tears attack the eyes, and the dejected reject man, flees the scene to go home alone and feast on spleen. TV packaged meals fall short of stopgap love, no comfort food here, only stewed regret. The remote control has never felt so remote as now, and show on show on show, the same, repeat, repeat, repeat. My head a zoetrope of all we had as we stepped from chance to chance towards the end. The other thing that does tend to happen that isn't reflected, I guess, with the character here of the King's Cross Angels, the rent boy, what I do tend to do with my poems as well is I do tend to step outside of myself and into a character. And there's quite a lot of that where there's a character at work in the poem. And these two here are also, the last two, they're also to do with having characters at work. Even my poems trying to escape from me. Behave. This one's called Madame Lala's All Stars. Now this is an even more special type of poem because not only does it not have the letter I, it doesn't have the letter E, O or U either. Okay, so the only vowel this has is the letter A. Okay? Yeah. The way to write this, if you're interested in giving one of these a go, sit down with a really, really big dictionary and read it all and write down all of the words that only have the A or no vowel at all. That takes 23 hours, back to back, and crystal meth. It took 23 hours to read the dictionary and write down all these words, and I'm just left with all these words. What have I got left? And you know, it was weird because on one hand I had words like Afghan and war and lots of sort of Arab sort of words, and I was heading into this direction about writing about this war thing, and I was like, oh no. And then I looked at the other side of the words, and I've ended up with Madame Lala's All-Star Gay Drag Act. Which I think is a lot more fun. I think there's too much misery in the world as it is. The other thing about it, it's bloody difficult to read. So, excuse me, I will trip up. Madame Lala's All-Star Gay drag act at Camp Manhattan Salsa Bar, all brawn and bras and cha-cha-chas, a fast-track gala, a la class act, sarcasm and schnapps, back crack and sack wax, spray tan and bad Walmart mascara, wham bam thanks ma'am. Man, what larks, crank and PCP, glad rags and handbags at dawn, half can, half walk, a grand sachet saga as all standard snatch scrams. Alas, drama at Manhattan Parkway, fag hags fall and flash gash at lads. Brass tacks brags, gaydar says, away! Fag hags hang back, lads gag at haggard slags and start a fatal fray. Bad karma. Madame Lala calls a cab and slams a charm at ham glam fag hag shams. All-star gay drag act at Camp Manhattan Salsa Bar, all brawn and bras and cha-cha-chas. This last one, again, so playing around with character, I was sitting on a train going down to London, and I always just listening to other people's conversations. So if you see me on a train or a bus, you know, you're probably best to belt up. Because I do listen in, and it was really interesting. This young lady, she was on the train. I assume from her conversation she was a medical student, and she was a sort of, you know, second or third generation Indian. Like her dad, I imagine, like from what I understand from the conversation, her dad was a first generation immigrant from India, and you know that becomes apparent why that's important, because she spoke with this really almost like public school British accent, and she was clearly at medical school either in London or in Norwich. And it was just interesting listening to her and thinking about her life, and I got thinking about her dad and the difference her dad might have had in his life and her life. And yeah, once again, I was also playing around with not using the letter I. So it's like putting myself in someone else's position, so I wasn't me. So you've got to imagine I'm a 25-year-old woman. My father, the butcher of Madras, became a surgeon of great renown. Endless swarms of lepers queued for hours and left as amputees. From Tambaram and Andhra Pradesh they came. One wealthy Raja came from Bangalore, travelled 7 days to lose a cursed thumb. The reward for that successful severance was gold. England beckoned to allow my father's seed a better set of chances than the lepers and the amputees. Work hard, he would say. Work hard and you shall have your rewards. He thought any of England's schools were as good as Eton or St Paul's. We worked hard at the standard local comp, turned our hands to our father's trade and learned to talk as well as any of our peers. But where was he? Tucked away, secreted, he butchered on the conveyor belt of OAPs as he anonymously set replacement knees for sedated elderly, whose loved ones then faltered when asked to care. All the old renown was left unknown. He was good though, and he looked good on the trust charts and spreadsheets, but there were no Rajas and no gold, just the long slow fade towards the grave. That wasn't very happy. I'll do one happy. Do one happy one. It's one, if people have seen me perform before, it's one I do quite a lot. I was talking to Lee about the fact I don't remember my poetry, and I probably should. So this is a slightly happy one. When I was about 4, my dear sweet mother was handed a box of Action Man from my next door neighbours. We lived in Cornwall. Next door neighbour handed over the Action Man, and it was Action Man, and so they must have been bought. I was 4 in 1980, so it must have been about 3. So it was 1979 or something like that. And so these Action Men, they must have been knocking around since the 60s or something like that. The outfits included the moon landing, the World Cup strip, things like that. They were amazing. All beautifully like stitched and everything like that, not like you get nowadays. And so, you know, my first experience of Action Man was really cool outfits and things like that. And then in the 80s, when I got my own Action Man, there were the eagle eye ones that you moved and the eyes moved and stuff like that. They could hold guns better. And then when my son came along, I ended up getting him some Action Man. I did the same thing. I got some knocked off from a neighbour. You know, and I was really freaked out because you take down the trousers and they've got nothing there. The ones from the 80s had big blue pants, and these ones had nothing there. And I was a bit concerned that my son was, you know, introduced to manliness by a eunuch. So this is called Action Man's a Eunuch. Action Man's a eunuch, I can't believe the shock. He slipped off his thick blue slips to reveal he has no cock. Barbie was all busty boobs and Cindy 50s perts, and Ken that sham of man with his stupid Hawaiian shirt. Action Man spoke through outfits, his story of our time, World Cups, World Wars, with no worldliness in his muscle wordless mind. He stormed the Iranian embassy on my bedroom chest of drawers. He parachuted into Port Stanley on far-flung southern shores, a hero to a child's eye. Legs astride he stands, like a Spaniard on a beach, plastic hips and rubber hands. I'd learned to dress my Action Man before I'd learned to tie my shoe. The 80s were the time to learn what a 90s man should do. I've never held a machine gun or cut a Nazi's throat. I've never been to space or scuttled an enemy boat. I've survived the last 30 years with a lot less action. I can plumb and build and cook and clean, and I do what I can. Action Man's a eunuch, all muscle and no schlong. Short-sighted were his eagle eyes that could see nothing wrong with machismo machinations of killing in the name of play. Children's imaginations are all innocent as clay. But now he's not just lost his pants, he's lost his freedom too. He comes pre-packed in plastic hell with directions what to do. And you'd see them if you walk around town on a normal Friday night. Plastic hair and rudderless, primed, waiting for a fight. But Action Man's a eunuch. He's up there in the dock. We've ripped off his thick blue slips to reveal he has no cock.